Agent Kister was running for his life. Every breath had burned in his throat, like inhaling chlorine gas. He sped through the dark, surrounded by deafening metallic screams that bounced off the eternity of pipes scaling and strangling the walls around him. As far as he was concerned, this was what hell looked like. A nightmare boiler room that would somehow be less scary if Freddy Krueger was there, because at least there'd be some kind of recognizably human intelligence to reason with. The pipes, SCP-015, are truly unknowable. As an SCP Foundation Mobile Task Force member, Agent Kister had seen some truly horrific things in the line of duty. He'd been there during SCP-682 containment breaches, firing an assault rifle at the beast as its scales hardened into a bulletproof carapace. He'd seen the femur breaker used on some poor, godforsaken D-Class to lure Uncle Larry back into the containment chamber for some midnight fun. In the most anxiety-inducing mission of his life, he'd once even bagged 096's weeping face after it slaughtered a whole mountain village. And these damn pipes were going to be the thing that killed him. He turned a sharp corner, trying to block out the screams of his teammates. 4 of them had been sent in. The rest were already dead, or worse. Stupid, stupid, stupid. They'd made a classic military mistake, underestimating the capabilities of their enemy. And in Agent Kister's experience, this had always been a capital offense. All to install that machine. That stupid little remote control reconnaissance vehicle. That's what they'd given their lives for. Agent Kister tried to blink away the memory of Agent Montgomery's face. Monty was the youngest member of the team, 28 years old, his first major mission into the heart of a skip. Kister wanted to remember him how he'd first seen him, a bright-eyed greenhorn, ready to protect the human race from the horrors that lay in the dark. But he'd been the first to go when everything got FUBAR. It was the smaller pipes that got Monty. 4 of them shot out, spearing his lungs and heart, pinning him in place. Even if they tried to cut him out, he would have been a goner. He coughed up blood and went ghost white faster than you'd ever imagine. Kister would never forget, for what little time he had left to live, the horrible sight of the light leaving that kid's eyes. And all this because one of them had tripped on one of the pipes on the way out and busted it. The mission was already done. What an awful, pointless way to die. Kister was yanked from his aching thoughts by a sudden obstacle in the way. A huge, towering pipe that looked like a pillar of flesh, covered in bulbous, staring eyes. The thought crossed his mind. Jesus, these pipes can really be made out of anything. He looked down and saw a series of rubber pipes slithering towards his feet along the ground like snakes. It was time to run again, but how long could you even run for when the very location around you wants you dead? They should have sent the mole rats for a job like this. The infinitely reconfiguring pipes changed the layout of the warehouse around him, making escape seem all the more unfeasible. That's when he started thinking about the terrible thing that happened to Agent Green. When 015 turned hostile, they needed to make a run for it fast. It wasn't unlike being a pathogen inside a living body. You start to make trouble, and the body's immune system is going to come for you. And one of the most common mechanisms for a body fighting a virus is a fever, a sudden increase in temperature that burns out the threat. The group turned and ran as the pipes started twisting towards them. Agent Green panicked and began striking at the pipes around him with his hands. The first instinct would have been to shoot, but no guns were permitted inside the SCP-015 warehouse. It reacted severely to any kind of tool being brought into its proximity. Several dead agents and researchers could tell you all about this if they hadn't made that same mistake. But when things were already going sideways, it left them defenseless. Agent Green was soon boxed in, caged by a latticework of pipes in varying sizes. He tried desperately to push them out of the way and make an escape route, but the hissing noise was getting louder and louder as the pipes started to turn a glowing red all around him. After all, when a body needs to deal with a hostile foreign object, it burns out the threat. Kister wished he could shake the awful high-pitched wail that Agent Green made while the heat inside his pipe cage became unbearable. It was like seeing a human get caught inside a giant bug zapper. His skin went black and charred, and soon after, the heat had risen to such an insane degree that Agent Green was reduced to little more than ash in his pipe furnace. But Kister couldn't afford to dwell. He kept running. vaulting over a long, ragged pipe made from stinking human hair. This terrible place stank of motor oil, mold, and death. But maybe those perceptions had been colored by the terrible things he'd seen here. There it was again, that awful choked screaming coming from inside the pipes. Agent Boggs. It was a nightmare to hear him shriek like that. Boggs had been one of the toughest men that Kister had ever met. He mentored him, back when he first became an MTF member. Having Boggs on the team meant experience. It meant safety. It meant that things would go okay. Kister had seen Boggs stare down some of the most horrifying skips imaginable and not even flinch. And yet, here he was, screaming and bawling like a hurt child in the pipes. Boggs was the next one to get taken. As he and Kister ran through the dark, trying to find a way out, they'd passed a huge pipe made of a soft foam-like substance. A seam in the side of the pipe had yawned open, and a tangle of writhing tentacles, each one barbed with thorns like the stem of a rosebush. They enveloped Agent Boggs, cutting into his weathered skin. He gasped in pain, unable to scream. It happened so fast. Before Kister even had a chance to grab him, he was pulled into the pipe, and the crevice sealed behind him. And that was when the screaming really started for poor Agent Boggs. Kister hoped for his sake that he would die sometime soon. Shrouded in the fog of his dark thoughts, Agent Kister turned a corner and felt cold, hard metal suddenly collide with his face, breaking his nose with an unpleasant crunch. He'd been clotheslined by a low pipe that hadn't been there before, and now he was laid out on his back, face humming with pain. Thoughts and feelings swam. He looked up into the seemingly infinite web of pipes weaving through the air above him. He was right earlier. He just knew it. The place was hell. It'd be his eternal resting place. Suddenly, a new, huge shape moved into the space above him. A pipe of ancient, rusty iron that looked older than even the warehouse holding this whole mess. Right above him, there was a huge valve fixed into the pipe's belly. He watched helpless as the valve opened itself with a squeal, and a huge dark mass came pouring out of it onto his body. A sudden weight, a sudden warmth, sound and movement, and tiny scratching claws. Rats. Thousands of big, hungry black rats with gnarled yellow teeth. Clumps of fur purged from their skin by mange. Big, ropey, worm-like tails swaying and whipping at the air. Who knows how long they'd been in that pipe? Who knows when these rats had eaten anything that wasn't their brothers and sisters? And here was Agent Kister, given unto them by the glorious pipes. The last thing he ever saw were those nasty yellow teeth, because they ate his eyes first. Word of the four disappeared, and presumed dead operatives soon reached Dr. Charles Ogden Gears, the legendarily taciturn senior researcher that managed the SCP-015 project, among a myriad of others. His face didn't betray a flicker of emotion when he was informed about the men lost to SCP-015. It wasn't that he didn't feel for them, more that he deemed it both unproductive and unprofessional to dwell on the deaths of personnel when carrying out their duties. After all, being killed by an anomaly was simply an occupational hazard, and a generous stipend would be sent to their families to compensate for their tragic loss. Dr. Gears simply asked, "Was the mission successful in spite of the casualties? Did the team manage to install the modular robotic vehicle at the epicenter?" He was told that the MRV had been successfully installed at least. Dr. Gears nodded and began scheduling a second exploratory mission for a few months in the future to check the status of the machine. Still, in the meantime, the MRV would chug along, doing what humans couldn't, or perhaps shouldn't, do within the nightmarish mess of ever-growing pipes. It would roll through, collecting information on everything around it, hopefully giving the SCP Foundation an inroad to mapping the whole thing, without needing to send a cavalcade of staff into the danger zone, just to discover more about these peculiar pipes. Sure, some lives were lost getting in there, but this measure would likely save even more lives in the long run. That was, until something went wrong. The exact nature of what happened to the MRV inside the domain of pipes was a mystery, but it wasn't doing its intended job, and the SCP Foundation needed to find out why. The second exploratory mission was required much sooner than they'd initially anticipated, with a dual purpose: collecting the readings and finding out what exactly had happened to the MRV in the first place. He included a more specific set of instructions for the next mission. Only 3 members of personnel to enter SCP-015 this time, to minimize potential loss. 1 trained technician to collect and read the diagnostics, and 2 guards to maintain discipline and safety under pressure. With a setup like that, what could possibly go wrong? Dr. Gears's various assistants began headhunting the perfect team for the job. Junior researcher Lon, wanting to prove herself and climb up the ranks, put her name forward. She was young, intelligent, and had the initiative to get the job done. Though there was one thing that she hadn't disclosed when she was applying for this important new position. Junior researcher Lon suffered from claustrophobia, the fear of enclosed spaces. Then the hunt was on for the 2 members of Foundation military personnel who'd escort Lon to the MRV to take the readings. Like the 2 priests in The Exorcist, they decided to recruit 1 grizzled, experienced operative and 1 extremely cautious young buck straight out of the Foundation MTF Training Academy. The younger of the 2 operatives, codenamed Agent 2, was careful and conscientious to a fault. He did things by the book, or not at all. The older operative, codenamed Agent 6, was quite the opposite. He'd done this job long enough to operate solely on instinct, and resented his employers for expecting him to approach his missions any other way. Lon, Agent 2, and Agent 6. The team was assembled, and when the time came, they were taken to SCP-015 to execute their mission. It should have been simple enough. Get in, collect the readings, and get back out. Though a few weeks earlier, the same thing would have been said for the mission to install the MRV, which left for Mobile Task Force operatives dead or worse. Nothing was ever as simple as it seemed when it came to SCP-015. They were only allowed flashlights inside. Anything else carried a substantial risk of activating SCP-015's defensive state, putting all of their lives in jeopardy. Lon had tried to keep things light, masking her own terrible fear at this strange new situation. She joked that perhaps the 3 of them should get Mario hats, seeing as they were plumbers now. Agent 2 happily laughed along, suggesting that perhaps he should be Luigi. Agent 6 was utterly unamused by this whole situation and wanted no part of it, which is honestly just so Wario of him. They followed along a carefully mapped route through the pipes, being careful not to touch any of them. After all, you never know what could set SCP-015 off. Agent 6 didn't share in their merriment or their concern. In fact, he had contempt for them and this whole situation. He thought Lon and Agent 2 were a pair of frightened, skittish children, willing to buy whatever Foundation-assigned bull honky they were given. He didn't believe that SCP-015 was anywhere near as dangerous as they'd been told. In all likelihood, knowing the eggheads up top, they just didn't want men of action like him breaking any of their precious little toys while conducting missions on their behalf. This whole thing was a big, stupid joke. As they ducked and weaved through the confines of SCP-015, the tensions between them all just silently grew. Their flashlights played among the pipes, revealing the insane variety of shapes, sizes, compositions, and materials in here. Wood, steel, flesh, bone, glass, pressed ash, granite, and so much more. And yet there were no pipes comprised of any standard pipe-making material, like lead, PVC plastic, or copper. It was undeniably freaky, but when you work with SCPs for long enough, you learn to stop asking questions about the more minor forms of strangeness inherent to anomalies. The composition only got narrower as they delved deeper into the warehouse. Lon felt the anxiety, like a hand gripping her throat and squeezing, but tried still to keep it hidden. Agent 6, the largest among them, almost got stuck a few times, trying to crawl into spaces too tight for him to fit. He felt like murdering Lon when she threw out a casual comparison to Winnie the Pooh in the process. When they reached the MRV, it gave them an ounce of momentary relief. The journey was halfway done. But the comfort was quickly squashed by seeing what had actually happened to the MRV. It had been speared by a pipe, and new pipes had grown through and out of it, effectively rooting it in place. This caused immediate debate among the group around one key issue. Did this mean that the MRV was now technically part of the pipes? And by extension, would the pipes feel the need to defend themselves if the databanks were removed from the MRV in order to deliver the readings back to the researchers at Site-17? While Lon and Agent 2 carefully discussed the issue, Agent 6 lost his temper and decided to show these two foolish kids how it was done. He claimed the two of them were worrying about a bunch of Foundation hooey that they were inexperienced and gullible enough to believe, as if this bunch of weird pipes was actually dangerous. It was like how every 6 anomalies there's apparently one capable of ending the world. It's all a bunch of overblown, fear-mongering nonsense. And to prove that he wasn't just all talk on this front, Agent 6 pried open the top of the MRV and slid out the data cards, which seemed to be covered in some kind of viscous, unpleasant liquid from the pipes that had penetrated the device. Still, he'd gotten what they came for. He could have done this whole thing alone without this pair of bedwetters. He scoffed and said, "Kids, I don't know how you two survive." But he shouldn't have spoken so soon. The large pipe that he didn't even realize he was standing on opened up beneath his feet, and seconds later he was immersed up to his shoulders in it. 6 began to let out the most horrifying shrieks you've ever heard, and when Agent 2 and Lon ran over to try and help him out, they realized why. The pipe below Agent 6 was filled with flowing molten iron. By the time they pulled Agent 6 out, well, Agent 6 from the shoulders up, considering that that was all that was left, he was already dead. And despite the actual aggressor being destroyed, SCP-015 wasn't done. It was ready to clean house. As Agent 2 and Lon attempted to flee, some eye-level pipes around them burst, firing crystallized glass into their faces, cutting into their skin and eyes. But they needed to push on, despite the pain if they wanted to survive and get out. The two of them ran, horrifying noises of twisting and bursting pipes roaring behind them. Pipes made of thorns and bones started to grow, blocking off their exits until they were trapped. Lon, utilizing her small frame, was able to crawl through a gap in the pipes into an adjoining chamber. 2 was given a horrifying surprise when a pipe burst near his hand, showering his flesh in thick, corrosive gunk. His hand melted away at the wrist. As Lon called for help in the tiny cramped chamber she was locked in, 2 ran off to try and find an exit where he could bring more people in to help them. But it would already be too late for poor Lon. A thick, honey-like substance began bleeding into the chamber, disgusting in its overpowering saccharine flavor and goopy, viscous thickness. The chamber seemed to get smaller and smaller as Lon screamed as the honey level rose. Eventually, it got higher than her mouth and nose could reach. She gave a horrifying final gurgle, and then she was gone, entombed forever between the pipes. Agent 2 kept running. His flashlight was beginning to die, but he didn't care. As his eyes bled from the splinters of glass and what was left of his hand dripped from the jagged nub of his wrist, all he could do was keep moving forwards. He panted and screamed and stumbled in the dark until he tripped on something he didn't notice and pitched forwards. He tumbled into the gaping maw of a nearby pipe, surrounded by unseeable, unknowable ooze. As he tumbled further down into the seemingly infinite darkness, it was too dark to see and too cramped to move anywhere but straight down. All he could do was scream and scream and scream, until his voice was hoarse and his throat bled, though nobody was there to even hear his cries. Days later, when his skin started to shred off, it was almost welcome. Dr. Gears would later receive the news of this tragically failed mission and the 3 operatives now declared MIA because of it. He sighed and wrote up his report on the matter, closing with the sentence, "Data deemed non-vital in light of lost staff. SCP-015 classification level review suggested." Now go check out SCP-049 Boiled, Scrambled, and Fried, Plague Dr. Tale, and what actually happened to Major Alexei Belatrov SCP-2273 Tale for more chilling tales from the files of the SCP Foundation.